stop giving your all. Let me call. Pussycat is living reckless. Pussycat is riding high.
And we're live.
Hello and welcome back to another voluptuous episode of the First Time Watchers podcast.
Because we like to watch.
My name is Tim Costa.
I'm Romano de Silva.
This is Walter Vinci.
And joining us tonight, our dear old friend, the man who bears his cleavage when pulling hair in a catfight, from writerandrew.com, Andrew Johnson. Welcome back to the show, Andrew.
Glad to be here. Glad you noticed.
How could I not? Andrew, talk to me about what's the latest at your high school film club. How's that going this year?
Oh, it's going well. We're having a lot of fun. We wrapped up a unit on film noir.
Nice.
We currently just started a unit on LGBTQ plus cinema, and after that we'll be looking at women filmmakers. So yeah, it's going well.
Any specific women filmmakers you're going to be focusing on? Anybody that's well known or maybe not as well known?
Oh, we're probably going to look at some Elaine May, Samira Nair, probably some Catherine Bigelow.
Nice.
So yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Sounds like fun. I'll look forward to keeping up with your posts on Letterboxd if you do that.
I'll definitely be posting my thoughts. Pretty much everything we watch in film club is stuff I've seen before, so it's always interesting to go back and rewatch stuff and discover what holds up and what really doesn't.
Nice. Excellent. In this episode, we'll be starting our Grindhouse exploitation film series by discussing the 1965 Russ Meyer film Faster Pussycat, Kill, Kill. But before we get into that, it is time for Yay or Nay. This is the part of the show where we discuss what we have seen recently on our own. Andrew, I know that you have seen The Batman, as have I.
I have.
Yeah.
What did you think?
What did I think? Oh, it's long. I can tell you that.
Very long.
It's really long. It doesn't need to be that long. Look, I appreciate the attempt to make it a detective noir dressed up in a bat suit, but just try to make it more engaging. I don't have an issue with movies being this long, but you have to earn it with each scene, and there's a lot of this movie that just is too stretched out. Did you feel the same way?
I did. I liked the movie, but man, around hour 2, I was starting to look at my watch and try and figure out how much more do I have left of this. I will say I really like the beginning of the movie, and I really like the ending of the movie. It's the chunk in between that I really don't care for. I think it does some really fascinating stuff with the Batman character, and I like Robert Pattinson in the role. It's a take on the character that we haven't really seen in the movies before, and I appreciate that. I appreciate how in many ways it is really trying to deconstruct and critique the Batman persona. It's like you said, it's the mystery that character is attempting to solve that didn't quite work for me.
I mean, I kind of like the mystery and the overall approach to the movie. I think the most obvious comparison that a lot of other people have said is David Fincher's work with Seven and Zodiac, especially with how much it rains in Gotham City. But it's one of those films that, once we get to that conclusion, I'm not sure I would have much of a reason to revisit this movie because it's not all that engaging or fun. I think the actor who's having the most fun is Colin Farrell. There's a few scenes with him that are, that kind of elevate this movie in terms of its fun factor, if you will. But even then, it's just very, very dour and just completely straightforward. Honestly, I'm pretty critical of the Nolan Dark Knight trilogy, and this movie actually made me want to revisit those films as well as Tim Burton's Batmans.
Yeah, I really liked the first 2 Nolan Batman movies. I need to revisit The Dark Knight Rises because I don't think I've seen that since it first was released in theaters. And I also really like the Burton Batman films. I think The Batman is a movie that probably, possibly at least, would improve on a rewatch. Once you kind of get a feel for where it's headed, what it's trying to do with the character. I would probably wind up fast forwarding through a few chunks in the middle. But it's at least trying to do some interesting things, even if it doesn't fully pull it off in the execution.
Look,
so I admire the attempt, and I would be interested in seeing a sequel with Robert Pattinson back in the role to see how they continue to develop his version of Batman.
sure, but look, I found that I think these movies are only as good as their villains, and also, the Riddler is an interesting villain in this, and how he's portrayed and what he does, and who he groups up by the end. I'll say, I like that idea, but there's no POV of the villain. We're always seeing this movie through Wayne's and Batman's eyes, and a lot of other better iterations of this character. The movies are better because you also get the POV from the villain, and obviously Heath Ledger's Joker. I would even say Jack Nicholson's Joker, or the Penguin and Christopher Walken's character in the second movie there. And so it just makes it more interesting, I think. And this movie just doesn't have enough variation to make it interesting. So it's fine though. It's fine.
I agree. It's fine.
Yeah. Anything else that you've seen that's worth mentioning?
I did watch the new Scream movie.
Oh yeah.
And I quite liked it. Scream, I think overall is one of the better slasher franchises out there. And I was a little worried that Scream 5 would just kind of be more of the same. But I actually really liked what they did with the formula and kind of the winking at the audience and keeping things meta. I thought it had some pretty good violence, pretty good kills, and overall, I had a good time watching it, which is more than I can say for another legacy sequel, I guess they're called, which is Ghostbusters Afterlife. Yeah, I've never been the biggest Ghostbusters fan, though the first one does amuse me overall. And yeah, this fourth one, not very good at all. I was pretty on board for maybe the first hour, and then after that it completely lost me. I really, really was bored through most of the second half, and it honestly feels like an even worse version of The Force Awakens in terms of how it's attempting to revitalize the franchise. It really didn't work for me at all. I also saw a movie called Catch the Fair One, which is a movie directed by Joseph Wladika, and it's a really interesting thriller, very tight, very just lean. Like, there's no fat on this movie at all. I think it might even be under 90 minutes long. And it's about a Native American boxer who tries to infiltrate a sex trafficking ring in search of her missing sister. So it's kind of this interesting John Wick meets Taken kind of film. Very well directed. I definitely want to see whatever Joseph Wladika and the star Kali Reese, who helped write it as well. Definitely want to see whatever they do next. And other than that, I saw Death on the Nile. Have any of y'all seen Death on the Nile?
No.
I have not.
Okay. I thought it might be fun to check out. I thought Kenneth Branagh's Murder on the Orient Express was okay. And Death on the Nile, I enjoyed. It's fun, it's just kind of simple popcorn entertainment. It's really nothing to write home about, but I enjoyed it more than his version of Murder on the Orient Express. And considering that a lot of it was made during COVID, I thought that it was fairly stylish, fairly well directed. It feels kind of old fashioned, just in terms of the acting styles and some of the dialogue. It's set in the 30s, and in some ways, it reminded me of a movie from the 30s. So I would say overall, if you just want to sit back, relax, and watch Kenneth Branagh as Hercule Poirot solve some murders, then sure, definitely check out Death on the Nile, especially if you like his mustache. Because there's a lot of interesting stuff the movie does with his mustache, and that's all I'll say.
Fair enough. Wally, what have you seen?
So speaking of cleavage, I've been watching Pam and Tommy
Oh,
on Hulu.
Yep.
Follow the story of Pamela Anderson and Tommy Lee's relationship going back to their whirlwind romance that started with them marrying after only knowing each other for 96 hours in 1995. It is currently on episode 7 on Hulu, and I think episode 8 came out last night, so it should be available to watch today. It's basically a recounting of like their relationship and the subsequent recording and theft of their sex tape, which catapulted them to super fame. Which they were already famous to begin with, but then there was there's that sex tape level fame. You know what I mean? It's well acted enough. Like I think they're doing a pretty good job of telling the story and seeing all the other like bits and pieces. I like to know how much they actually how much embellishment there actually is in all this, because I feel there's a lot.
I would imagine
going on in this.
Yeah.
In terms of like what's going on with like the producers, one of which is the thief is played by Seth Rogen, and Nick Offerman's like this like sleazy like porn director that's working with him. And then there's a whole like underground thing that goes on with that I don't know how much of that is actually true, but yeah, it's entertaining as fuck. Is it like high end television? No, but I am enjoying it, and so I will give it a yay.
One thing for me, I just caught up with a film that I've been anticipating for a while, and it's from the director of Columbus, and that's After Yang, directed by Kogonada, starring Colin Farrell and Jodie Turner-Smith, and Haley Lou Richardson shows up in this one too. In a near future, a family reckons with questions of love, connection, and loss after their AI helper unexpectedly breaks down. Yeah, this is, on one level, I think you could see this as kind of exploring similar ideas from Columbus as like individuals' purpose in life. But this movie does also explore a lot more than that and doesn't bother to keep it subtle. It's quite obvious what he's trying to say here. Things from, ethical and moral questions about artificial intelligence to family and memories and stuff like that. And it's a movie that's kind of oddly paced too. It doesn't really follow a traditional story structure, and instead, there's more like these series of ideas and memories, just free flowing, and it kind of just ends too at an interesting place. And I had commented before on Columbus when I had talked about that and how amazing the compositions are, and how well shot that movie is in capturing buildings and framing people within structures and outdoors as well. And this movie doesn't feel nearly as rigid. There's a much softer color palette with a lot of earth tones. And even though the camera, I think, is still at the time, there's just a sense of floating that I got, which is interesting. And there's like these shifting aspect ratios too, where one is just showing the story that's unfolding. There's another aspect ratio. It's like a 4:3 in which it's supposed to depict like video communications, and then another one which fills the entire frame, which are showing the memories. So it's a really interesting experience, and it will probably reward a rewatch later in the year to see how well it holds up. And you know, it's like if I'm trying to narrow down my top 10 or 20 or whatever. So I mean, I would recommend if you were a fan of Columbus, if you're a fan of interesting, sci-fi and how you can build a world pretty subtly with within that genre. I would recommend After Yang. You can watch it on Showtime right now. It's also in theaters from A24. So, Hermano, what have you seen?
I watched another film with Fast in the title.
Yes.
F9, the Fast Saga.
Yes.
Dom and the crew must take on an international terrorist who turns out to be Dom and Mia's estranged brother.
Yeah, they do.
Spoiler.
Oh boy.
So
Tim,
what did you think of the best movie of 2021?
Yes.
Oh, you're gonna be really disappointed.
Oh.
No, I think Romano's in my camp.
Like I've said for the past, I think since 7, I feel like it's been diminishing returns. I don't know if that I'm that on board anymore with anything they're really doing.
Oh man.
Because I don't know, it's just something about it. I feel like they're kind of repeating themselves a little bit too. Like there's a lot of like catching people on cars in this film, and I'm like, yeah, we've seen that. They flip a semi trailer or some sort of big beast fucking thing, and I've seen that in the Dark Knight. It's kind of ripping that off. But I don't know. I think on some level, I think I'm just over the absurdity. Like I think it's getting too absurd now. Like I don't know. It's kind of hard to really put my finger on it, but like I know like how we used to joke like, oh man, they're doing such crazy things in these films. Like what are they going to do next to top that? Like every film has to top the previous film, and they get into levels now where like we used to joke around like, oh, they got to go to space at some point, and in this film they literally go to space, and I was just like, I could care less. Like I just like we were kind of joking around. Like I mean, we didn't really want you to go to space. We just thought like you guys were being so absurd to a point where the only way you could possibly top it is if you went to space.
Oh, this is the ultimate fan service.
Yeah, you know what
I always wanted them to go to space.
Yeah, in a Fiero with a rocket attached to it. There's so many things in this film. I mean, when I say absurd, I mean absurd. Like the guy from Tokyo Drift is in this.
It's great.
And he somehow knows how to fly a fucking jumbo jet.
Yes.
I'm like, what is happening right now? He knows how to build rocket engines.
Lucas Black is a rocket scientist. Yes.
It's insane. Like, I don't know. You know what I kind of compare it to though? Is like there's a level of absurdity that I think you can't cross. There's like a line. Like where I think Cobra Kai is kind of nailing it because there's a lot of stuff in that show that's pretty absurd, but they somehow just nail it. Where I think Fast 9 and the Fast Furious franchise as a whole is all they're really doing is trying to top the previous film with like more like soap opera level like stuff, like the John Cena thing, like the whole origin story of like what happened to their relationship, and all that stuff. Like I don't know, it's almost like telenovela level stuff. Like,
yes, it's great.
The writing's not particularly great. Not that I expected it to be, but it's even lower than the bar I had set for it. So everything you're explaining makes it one of the best movies of last year. Yeah, but I think honestly,
you're saying that it's a big budget soap opera, like that's a bad thing.
Yes.
It's not necessarily a bad thing if that's your thing, but I don't know if you guys have seen the IMDb rating. Not that I put a lot of stock in ratings per se, but I was kind of surprised because I gave it a 6, and when I looked over to what the average is, it's like 5.2.
That's crazy.
For this film on IMDb out of 116,000 reviews. So, I mean, I think maybe people are starting as a whole kind of getting tired of the franchise. Like it is kind of crazy to think that there's been 9 films and they're going to do 2 more to end it off. So I don't know, man. I think I'm going to finish it up. Obviously I'm a completionist, but I don't know that I'm that looking forward to the next one. So it's kind of a man, to be honest.
Are you just as convinced as I am that Paul Walker's Brian is going to be back in at least one of the next 2 movies?
Without getting into spoilers, they do seem to sort of insinuate that he'll somehow be involved. But I mean, I don't know how they're going to do it. I mean, are they going to just completely CGI him?
I bet.
The technology is so good now that they probably could. I just don't know about how ethical that is. Even if I don't know. I guess if you get the family's approval, it's whatever. But I don't know. It's just a little weird.
Voy pa' la calle, quiero velocidad. Voy pa' la calle, quiero velocidad. Quiero velocidad, quiero velocidad. Yo voy pa' la calle, quiero velocidad. Quiero una mami que te ratata. Pila de cuarto que voy a gastar. Sube la música, sube la más. Accelerate, so we know, so we create, so we do this every day, cause we shot them straight. Book up, so we accelerate. Book up, so we not hesitate. Blazing amazing, you know, so we crazy. We doing this daily, we real and amazing. Book up, so we accelerate. Book up, so we not hesitate. Andrew arrives.
What?
Hey guy, what the hell is that?
Rude.
You want to explain this to him, Walter?
Wait, was he here for the clown problem?
What is going on here?
I ask myself that all the time, Andrew.
But you know what show always asks the right questions?
The In Session Film Podcast?
That's right, Andrew. The In Session Film Podcast is JD and Brendan.
I wouldn't mind asking Brendan a few questions if you know what I mean.
What is going on here?
And each week, the In Session Film Podcast chooses a movie to review.
And then creates a top 3 list based on what they just saw.
And this week, the In Session Film Podcast is reviewing The Batman.
And gives a bonus review of Kogonada's latest After Yang.
You can find the In Session Film Podcast on Apple Podcasts by searching for, you guessed it, the In Session Film Podcast.
Or on the web at InSessionFilm.com.
So if you're in the mood for more great movie reviews and discussion,
And check out the In Session Film Podcast on Apple Podcasts.
or on the web at InSessionFilm.com.
So, you're not going to say hi to Romano now?
Oh, is that what's happening here?
If it's not one thing, it's another.
The void, it sings its song of oblivion.
All right, now it is time for our semi-regular installment of Scorching Hot Takes with Andrew Johnson.
I got fire in my pants, you about to burn your hands.
Go F yourself, you burn.
Good afternoon, good evening, and good night.
This is where Andrew burns us all with his opinions that are sure to leave some marks. Andrew, how fast is your Pussycat?
It's pretty fast, Tim.
Woo!
But I want to talk a little bit just about a franchise that you and I just discussed not too long ago. Everyone's talking about the Batman. And it got me thinking about what are the best Batman movies. And I realized that really, honestly, one of the best Batman movies ever made is Joel Schumacher's Batman and Robin. Now, just hear me out. I know that when this movie came out, it was really, really hated by a lot of people. There is an attempt now to reclaim it. And I gotta say, I'm on board with those attempts. I think that this movie was ahead of its time. I think that as a culture, we just were not ready for Joel Schumacher's incredible vision of Batman. I saw this movie for the first time when I was around 13 years old, and I loved it then, and I still love it, even today. This movie is big, it is bold, it is so incredibly flamboyant, it is incredibly over the top. This movie has elements that I wish filmmakers like Matt Reeves kept. For example, the Nolan Batman movies, the new one, they're just so dour and serious and dark. And Batman and Robin is not dark at all. Its version of Bruce Wayne is not haunted. George Clooney just seems like he's having a great time running around the city as Batman. He's got a Batman credit card. He's a celebrity. He's a capitalist icon. He's a billionaire just living the good life. And he's having a good time. And as a result, so am I when I watch the movie. Also, a lot of people make fun of Arnold Schwarzenegger as Mr. Freeze, but he's trying to freeze the city. That's incredible that a $125 million movie would have that as its plot. Nowadays, you couldn't do that in a Batman movie. People would say it's too goofy. But you know what? Batman is goofy. This is like an episode of the 60s TV show on steroids. The sets still look pretty cheap, but they're big, they're colorful, there's so much neon. And also, if you thought that if you're one of those people that thinks there's got to be something, how should I put this? If Batman has to have, if he's hiding something, this movie makes it clear he's closeted. Okay, this is definitely a queer movie. Joel Schumaker, an out gay man, is really just putting all of that, his queer energy, into this film. It feels like a drag show at times. The title is Batman and Robin because it's clear that they're meant for each other and they love each other. It's not entirely platonic. The only reason Poison Ivy and Batgirl are in this movie is, in my opinion, because the studio felt like they had to have some women in there. It's a very horny movie, in a good way, and I miss that. The new Batman movie does finally try to add some level of sexuality to its characters, but it just doesn't compare to the opening shots of this film, which are just close-ups on abs, nipples, butts. This movie is a blast, and it kicks ice.
Oh, Jesus Christ. Well, yeah, it's one thing to have a fun time with a movie, but do you think it's legitimately a good, well-made movie?
I do. You know, Batman Forever, I think, also has some elements going for it worth defending, but I think that Batman and Robin is a better directed film. A lot of the action scenes in Batman Forever are filmed in close-up and medium shots. You don't really get a sense of the sets and the choreography. And in Batman and Robin, I don't know if it's just that Joel Schumacher is just getting better at directing the superhero action, or if it has something to do with the budget. But he's able to keep the camera pulled back far enough where you can really, really see the sets and Gotham City, and the production design and the action choreography flows a lot better. So yeah, I would say it's a very well crafted film. I mean, considering it's the kind of movie in which a scientist gets frozen and then unfrozen in the span of a few minutes and just goes, "Oh, it's one of those days." I mean, that's the kind of movie that we're dealing with here. And as long as you go in with that mindset that this is not a movie that takes itself seriously, it's like a live action cartoon, I mean, you'll have fun.
Yeah, this is a movie I don't think I've seen since the theaters. I probably saw it in the theater, and I don't think I've seen it since. Hermano, do you have a recollection of this movie at all?
Well, not really, but at first I didn't realize that Andrew was talking about that film with George Clooney. I thought he was talking about the Val Kilmer one, and I was sort of on board until I realized it was the George Clooney one. And I was like, again, I haven't seen it in a long time, but this film to me, Batman and Robin, that is the Nick Cage as Superman of hero films. It's just doesn't strike the right tone or the right anything.
Interesting. I would still pay to see a Nick Cage Superman movie.
Now maybe, not back then.
Wally, what about you? How do you remember this movie?
I was talking about this with Kate and made the exact same points that Andrew just made. That this, on a review watching, is a 1966 Batman movie that nobody understood what he was doing at the time. But if you go back and watch it with that lens up, it's exactly, the only thing that's missing is the large pow biff sock where it's popping up on the screen. I mean, even from the very beginning, where they're arguing over who gets to bang Poison Ivy, who clearly says that, like, the whole thing, she is what is up for sale when she references the honeypot. And they're going, back and forth. And what does Batman do? Pulls out the Bat credit card. Like, that's a 66 Batman right there, where everything would be labeled. Like, oh, we got to go to Bat TV, and they'd walk over and it would just say Bat TV across the top. I am completely on board with Andrew here. Completely on board.
She comes creeping round. She's pretty as a daisy, but look how now she's crazy. She'll really do you in if you're left hanging under your skin. Poison ivy, poison ivy, poison ivy, sweet poison. Late at night while you're sleeping, she comes creeping round, 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 creeping around.
He brings the popcorn. She brings the roses. Subject Cinema, a tasty new film topic each week with a side order of film reviews.
Yum.
T.C. Kirkham.
But I'm Jing.
Kim Brown.
What?
Over 500,000 listeners, and you could be the next one. SubjectCinema.com. Real movies for real people.
This podcast is a proud member of the Lamb Podcasting Network. Find the network at largeassmovieblogs.com.
Okay, let's talk about Faster Pussycat. Kill, kill.
Nice set of wheels.
Would you like to look under my hood?
Been running some timing trials?
We know how fast we can go. Could time that heap with an hourglass.
Someone mention my figure?
In that outfit, what's the mention?
Oh, shall I set up shop here, Tommy?
Do you girls mind if we run some timing trials? This is about the best measured strip around.
Be our guest. Might be kind of interesting.
Okay.
You sure we're not crowding you, huh? Oh, no, I'm glad you're here. Would you like a soft drink?
You're putting me on, no? A soft drink, chef. Honey, we don't like nothing soft. Everything with us is hard.
All set, hon. Clock me from when I hit that marker there till I finish at that one. You'll see a puff of smoke from my exhaust when I cut in the motor. That's when you hit the magic button.
And just to warn people ahead of time, this will be a spoiler-filled discussion, so beware. The plot. 3 go-go dancers holding a young girl hostage come across a crippled old man living with his 2 sons in the desert. After learning he's hiding a sum of cash around, the women start scheming on him. As they do. The director, Russ Meyer. The actors, Tara Santana, Haji, Laurie Williams, and some others. Andrew, was this a first-time watch for you?
This was a first-time watch for me. I gotta say, the exploitation genre is one of my blind spots. I haven't really seen that many. And this is a movie that I'd heard of, but I'd never had a chance to sit down and watch it until now. And I gotta say, it was fun. exploitation movies on the whole really aren't my thing. They're kind of simple, shallow, and yes, to a certain extent, they're all just about the lurid content and kind of the shock value of them at times. And a lot of time I don't like that. Sometimes that's kind of what I'm in the mood for, and I can understand the appeal of just saying, you know what, I just want to sit back, relax, watch some violence, watch some ladies in some skimpy outfits, and that's it. So while I won't say that this movie blew me away, I enjoyed it quite a bit, and I can definitely see how it's had a massive influence on other filmmakers, such as Tarantino, for example, and other filmmakers who really pay homage to the exploitation genre. I mean, this is definitely one of the staples of the genre. So yeah, overall, I liked it.
Hermano, how do you see this movie as kicking off this series?
I also had never seen it before, but I was aware it existed, and I believe I was aware also of how it was regarded, as directors being influenced by it, and kind of, I guess, the reputation of being one of the, like, I guess, quote unquote better exploitation films. And I gotta admit, I was a little nervous when it first started, because to steal a line from Wall-E, it seemed a little bit like artsy fartsy bullshit. And that's to say, just like maybe like the first like few minutes, where I was like, oh no, what is this? But then it does kind of turn a corner, and there is an attempt at a plot. So it's not exactly just about the male gaze and looking at scantily clad women for the entire runtime. But yeah, it did go some places where I didn't expect. Like I really had no expectations. I just kind of knew it existed, like I said, and I didn't really know if there even was much of a story. But I was kind of surprised with the whole getting to the that family's house in the desert, and their whole plan to rob them or whatever. I was just kind of interested in like the characters. I thought the characters were interesting, weird but interesting. I was never bored. And again, like Andrew said, I certainly saw the inspiration for Tarantino, even in a film like Death Proof.
Mm-hmm.
I think probably drew some inspiration from this film. But yeah, it surprised me a bit. I wouldn't say I had set a low bar, but I wasn't expecting a lot out of it. But I could definitely see why it's well regarded. It's I don't know, it's just something about it. Like, it's just one of those things. It's like this untangible thing that you just can't put your finger on, but this film sort of has it.
Wally, you had recommended this movie because I think you had seen this before.
I have seen this before. I love this movie. This movie is awesome, and I like it because it is a brave ass movie. Because this came out with 1966. It's all women leads. A lot of them don't have really a lot of acting experience, but they're dealing with stuff that you would never see in a in the mainstream. Like very early on, Varla breaks a dude's neck while fighting with him. You know what I mean? They kidnap his girlfriend, and then they come up with a plan to rob the gas station attendant and his son. And then after that, it becomes like, all right, we're gonna find get the money, we're gonna go back and we're gonna kill them all. You know what I mean? And it's not something that I think that audiences were used to seeing. This was why I think part of it was not a commercial success. I think in the 60s it was still women being seen and not heard still. You have the evolution of the women's movement coming through around this time as well. Like, they're starting to really get their make their voice known in the public eye. And now you've got this director that's putting it right there on the big screen. You know what I mean? That's something. And you can take away the fact that the acting is not that great. I mean, the visuals are fine. When I'm talking about they're all attractive women. So it's like Charlie's Angels, if Charlie's Angels was allowed to do whatever the fuck it wanted. But there's there's intent here, and I like, I always say that there's like bad movies that are made to be bad on purpose, and they suck. It's these movies that are not great. You know what I mean? They're not like what we call like high cinema, but they're awesome because they are made with intent and with heart, and that's what this is. Like the acting, not that great. Sound, not that great. Some of the shots, okay, sure. But you're telling me a story that I'm engaged with, because this is something that I'm like, all right, where are we going? Where are we going next with this? Because I have no idea what we're doing next. And it's got enough twists and turns. I think that it just really keeps you engaged the entire time.
I agree with you, Wally. I had seen this movie a couple of years ago for the first time, and I loved it then, and I loved it again, this movie. Probably even more so than the first time I saw it, because I think the first time I saw it, I was just kind of in awe of what was happening here and how I was taken aback, I think, as you guys were, at the level of intent and craft here. And I was the first time I saw it, I was like, this movie is probably more layered than I'm giving it credit for, and it is layered. And I love how the opening of this film features a narration that does a really good job of giving you an idea of what to expect in this movie.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to violence, the word and the act. While violence cloaks itself in a plethora of disguises, its favorite mantle still remains sex. Violence devours all it touches, its voracious appetite rarely fulfilled. Yet violence doesn't only destroy, it creates and molds as well. Let's examine closely then this dangerously evil creation, this new breed, encased and contained within the supple skin of woman. The softness is there, the unmistakable smell of female. The surface, shiny and silken. The body yielding yet wanton. But a word of caution, handle with care and don't drop your guard. This rapacious new breed prowls both alone and in packs, operating at any level, any time, anywhere, and with anybody. Who are they? One might be your secretary, your doctor's receptionist, or a dancer in a go-go club.
And then it's followed by the three leads that are dancing at a club with, these men that are catcalling them and leering at them. And I find this scene really fascinating because it's actually pretty empowering. I think it's the start of we're here, and throughout the whole movie, I think the camera does a really good job. And in this scene, it shows the women in this domineering position, and it like higher than the men who are viewed as lower and more voracious. They're animals. And this movie, what it does, it continues to demasculate men at every possible turn. It's every single male figure is impotent in some way, whether it's a lesser vehicle or lesser driving abilities, or their physical limitations, their mental limitations. The women are always presented in a more powerful position. Even the final scene is resolved by a female character. And I just love this movie. It's, we talk about I was talking about the camera, and I think that Meyer always positioned the camera in a place for, yes, maximum titillation, where we can view as much cleavage as possible, or also at like hip level where either both male and female groins are swaying towards the camera. And it's really great. But also the way he composites a lot of shots in layers, characters within frames is really well done. I think you have cars coming right towards the camera as well. Those that could be viewed, as a sexual tool in some sort of way. Speaking of sexual tools, the dialogue, all the dialogue is some sort of sexual innuendo. I love it. Yep. There's lots of words that are double entendres. So it's really interesting. Andrew, did you see any of these layers?
Yeah, I really think you're bringing up some excellent points about the film's gender politics. And it is interesting as an artifact of the 1960s. You know, you've got the rise of second wave feminism beginning. You have more attention being drawn to issues around women and sexuality and women's rights. And like you said, there is this really interesting tension in the film where the lead actresses are very much there as sex objects for the audience. And the camera is constantly gazing at their butts and their cleavage and objectifying them. And yet, while it's doing that, as you mentioned, it's also presenting the male characters as kind of creepy or somehow less than the women characters. And it is, you know, at no point do you really get the sense that the men are heroes. They're often either weak or they're presented as creepy and dangerous, not that smart. Maybe in the case of like the gas station attendant, you got some comic relief there. So there really is this interesting tension between how the audience objectifies the women characters and how the camera does that at times, and how they are presented throughout the film in terms of the story.
I don't know if I necessarily agree that all the guys come off as creepy, though I think definitely some of them do. And I agree with a lot of the points you made, Tim, but I would argue that the guy in the beginning really doesn't do anything wrong. I mean, he just wants to race them, basically, or not really. He just wants to race against the clock, and then they, you know, the women challenge him to a race, and he's ultimately gonna win, but the women cheat, or the one woman cheats to knock him off course, basically. And you know, I don't know if you guys agree, but I don't really think that guy did anything to deserve what happens to him. I'd also argue that the younger brother, or the older brother, I guess, isn't necessarily a bad guy. He just gets sucked in for a bit and then smartens up and, you know, thinks better of it. But I certainly agree with the father and, to an extent, the mentally challenged younger brother.
Vegetable.
Yeah. Odd.
No, I do agree with you about the guy at the beginning who just wants to race, but you know, I think he's there as a tool, of course, to progress the plot, and also as an outlet for, you know, just another way to emasculate a man and show that, you know, and this is all, you know, along with the dialogue, the innuendo laden dialogue that, you know, throughout that confrontation, and how it's essentially, you know, he all he wants to do is race, and all he wants to do is see how powerful his mighty car is, which is all obvious allegories for sex and his penis and all that kind of stuff. And it's just a situation for them to cut that off from him. And yes, I agree that he is not a bad guy. You know, we don't really know much of his relationship with this young girl, but you imagine that he doesn't pay enough attention to her, and probably pays more attention as more interest in cars and racing and stuff like that. But you know, I will say though that it leads to that fight, which ends brutally. You know, the way she snaps his back, holy shit!
Yeah,
that's something else.
But honestly, that whole beginning too, like, I don't know if you guys took this away, but it really just felt like some sort of like counterculture response to like the films of the decade prior,
sure,
like the 50s.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Where those characters are really like wholesome, like Leave It to Beaver level characters. They almost seem like oblivious to the idea that these girls aren't probably, you know, there with good intentions. And, you know, obviously bad things come of it, and the film takes a dark turn almost immediately.
It's kind of like that movie Pleasantville, where these virginous people are suddenly corrupted.
Yeah, and I think even to an extent, the gas station attendant, where he seems like completely misplaced,
right,
in these women inhabit, and it just feels like he should have been in a film like 10 years ago. Like some sort of like, again, like a Leave It to Beaver or some
Right.
sort of like thing like that.
Yeah,
or,
he seemed right out of Mayberry from Andy Griffith's show or something.
Yeah, Andy Griffith Show. That's what I was trying to think of. Yeah. So I don't know. Like, I feel like the whole film doesn't really linger on that. It just, there's a couple scenes where it really felt like he was just trying to shatter that mold. And
Sure.
he definitely does.
Sure. Yeah, and it's I don't know. It's just really interesting to see how this movie plays out. I will say that the time on the ranch and the interaction with that family is kind of, probably stretched out the most out of anything in this movie. And look, I'm not looking. I don't think you're going to find any sense of realism when you're watching this movie, but I think it does stretch credulity in terms of how long they stay at this ranch and how long, I don't know, both parties are willing to put up with either person. So, but yeah, outside of that, I just find this an amazing, I don't know, kind of time capsule. Like you said, counterculture is a good description, and just how it plays out is really interesting.
This movie is clearly the visual representation of fuck the patriarchy. This is women coming up, women getting a voice, like I said earlier, them gaining their independence, kind of shaking off the old home, like you said, the 50s, Leave It to Beaver homemaker roles. They're out there throwing knives, they're driving fast cars, they're fighting dudes and snapping them in half, and showing just how capable they actually are as women, and showing them, this spotlight. But at the same time too, you also don't. It takes a hand too to you have these protagonists like going around doing things, but there's also making sure that they're staying kind of on the villainous side enough so that who like what side you're on as far as you goes along watching this, like, oh, these guys are doing like villains. I guess these are the bad guys, but we're following them around. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Andrew, anything else to add?
I think y'all really hit the nail on the head. I mean, I was struck just by, again, how kind of in your face it is with everything. By this point in history, the Hays Code is definitely on the way out, and you can tell that Russ Meyer and the filmmakers are really taking advantage of that. And like you said, Tim, every line of dialogue, it's just like there's so much innuendo. It's just hard not to cackle and have a good time. And even some of the non-innuendo lines just had me laughing out loud. Like there's a point where the guy at the beginning says, "What's the point?" And the response is, "It's of no return." And you're about to reach it. It's just really over the top and goofy and fun. And yeah, it's a good time.
Yeah. Anything else to mention about this before we get into grades? Like, what do you think about this final confrontation there, Wally, at the end?
I was fine with it. I mean, like, it made logical sense. Like, I'm like, how is this all going to end? Keep in mind that you still want to send the audience home with a sense of the bad guys got theirs, that they didn't just run roughshod over everybody and get away with it, because I think that would have played poorly. But you have a woman saving the day at the end. Like, she's the one that deals that decisive blow to put a stop to this. You know what I mean? And to stop their little reign of terror.
Hermana, what did you think about this woman's judo chop with every fight scene?
It was literally the next words that were going to come out of my mouth. I was like, I would have liked the film to explore maybe a flashback or something of Varla and her martial arts training. I mean, her karate chops were deadly, man. Holy crap. Karate chopping those necks.
Yeah. I will say, if anything was going to tire me out, it was the young girl's hysterics and her constant, I don't know, just wailing, if you will, because she didn't have much else to do, unfortunately. But it's good that she got to save the day at the end with a car, of course. You gotta use a car to save the day. All right, I guess we can get into grades. Andrew, what grade would you give this?
I would give this a solid B.
What about you, Wally?
I would give this like a solid A. I think that you know, if you all the technical stuff aside, I think that the story is compelling. Its timing, its messaging, its overall, view of society, like it's a little, societal snapshot, as it were, of the mid '60s. So I give it a solid A.
This is an A+ movie all the way for me. I adore this movie. I think, at first glance it can seem like some sort of like smut-laden exploitation movie, but it really ends up being an interesting examination of like sexual dynamics and gender roles, and it's like you said before, it's no coincidence this film comes at the dawn of the sexual and female revolution. So it's fantastic. What about you, Hermano?
A- for me. Yeah, it really surprised me. I don't know how else to word it, but I was just glad it wasn't boring and it had more going for it than just the titillation.
All right, that does it for this episode of the First Time Watchers podcast. Donate via patreon.com/firsttimewatchers or buy stuff at zazzle.com/firsttimewatchers.
Talk to us on Twitter at 1STTimeWatchers on Twitter.
Or write to us at our email, firsttimewatchers@gmail.com.
Please download our episodes on Apple Podcasts and Stitcher. Feel free to leave a review because we love feedback. If you have any suggestions of movies for us to watch, please send a tweet or an email. Speaking of suggestions, let's recommend a movie. I'll go first very quickly because, we were talking about series before, and a series that I just finished rewatching, and my significant other watched for the very first time was the Star Wars movies, all 9 episodes, as well as one of the stories in between. And the one that I'll recommend is Rogue One, a Star Wars story, which, look, more Star Wars movies like this, please. Please, please. I think this movie has the best production design and costuming and integration of CGI and practical effects of any of the Star Wars movies. I love how it shows the seedy underbelly of the rebellion and everything within, and there's a real great sense of scale by Gareth Edwards, and Giacchino's score is really good too. And this was the significant other's favorite Star Wars movie, and I can see why. It's great. It's in my top 3 of Star Wars movies. So suck on that. Andrew, what do you got?
Well, we were just talking about how Faster Pussycat Kill Kill really tries to stick it to the patriarchy. And to a degree, I think that Jackass Forever does that as well. So I'm going to recommend Jackass Forever, the 4th movie in the Jackass series based on the MTV television show. And I think this series is fascinating in that, its whole deal is that it's just a bunch of guys doing these pranks and these stunts, and to a degree it feels like kind of this group of like frat boys and bros getting together, and a lot of the humor is very childish and juvenile, and there's a lot of body humor, and yet it kind of takes all of those maybe the more negative stereotypes we might have about guys like that, and it really deflates them. And I'm surprised just at how much attention is given in Jackass Forever to literally smashing masculinity in the form of their penises. And just the way that it kind of takes these ideas about what it means to be a man and deconstructs them and kind of really presents healthy masculinity as a masculinity that is tough and is focused on friendship and bonding and isn't afraid to dance and be flamboyant at times. This movie is a lot of fun, and the series in general, I think, is just a really interesting work of art. I'll just say that it's a work of art. So if you haven't seen Jackass Forever, go check it out.
What about you, Wally?
All right, I'm going to roll the clock back for our recommendation that you should go back to episode 208, what we released on 2016, and we're going to stick with the exploitation movie genre, and we're going to go to Toshio Fujita's Lady Snowblood. A strikingly beautiful woman is trained from birth to be a deadly instrument of revenge against the swindlers who destroyed her family. This movie's fucking awesome. Like, this movie has got like some like wild action pieces, and it's every bit as good as Faster as Pussycat Kill Kill. So I can recommend this one enough.
Hermano.
All right, I'm going to recommend a different type of exploitation film, a blaxploitation film from 1988. I'm going to Get You, Sucker.
Yes.
In this parody of blaxploitation movies, a black hero wannabe reunites former black heroes from the 70s to help him get revenge on Mr. Big. Tim, have you seen this?
I have not.
Oh, it's good.
I might have to put it on my second time watches list because this was a favorite of mine when I was younger. Tim, this cast alone is going to get you on board. Keenan Ivory Wayans, Bernie Casey, Steve James. You know who Steve James is, right?
Yes.
God damn it, Tim. Isaac Hayes, Jim Brown. John Vernon is Mr. Big. You might remember him from Animal House.
Sure.
I think he was the dean of the school.
Yep.
Really funny parody of the blaxploitation films. I watched a lot of these because my dad rented them for me. So I didn't know what blaxploitation was. I just watched these films as like, they were just films that were mostly starring, black actors or whatever. I didn't think anything of it as a kid. But watching the parody, it's when it finally clicked to me that, there was something up with these films, and like once I saw it parodied, I was like, okay, I think I get it now.
This double scene in the bar is one of the funniest fucking parts of that movie.
Yeah, I really want to revisit this, man. I really am considering. I think I'm definitely going to put it on my second time watches. I'd like to revisit this at some point.
Andrew, thank you so much for joining us.
No problem. This was a lot of fun.
Where can people find you online?
You can find me at writerandrew.com, and you can follow me on Twitter and Letterboxd at writerandrew.
Excellent. And stay tuned for our next episode. We'll be continuing our Grindhouse exploitation series by discussing the 1974 Sonny Chiba film, The Street Fighter.
That's the First Time Watchers podcast because we like to watch.
Well, just you try. It's that she doesn't say what's wrong from right. She's running fast and free, child of the night. In her life there'll be no time for love. You'll never take her, make up your mind. Pussycat, she's living reckless. Pussycat, she's riding high. If you think that you can tame her, well, just you try. Yeah, just you try. Come on and try.
Well, his average is better than below? I don't know.
Well, it's like we love your enthusiasm, but we really need you to slow down with your execution because you're making too many mistakes. There's a lot to learn about all this.
You're pumping too hard.
It is. It's like it comes from just being in an environment where people like need things yesterday all the time.
Interesting. And this is not that environment.
Thing that we need this. We like this. We need this, but like to really just kind of take my foot off the gas a little bit.
Yeah, because you like to pump it really hard.
That's the only way to do it.
That's the only way to do it. You hear that, Hermano?
The void. It sings. Wait, what? Okay, sorry.